Good evening, Internet, and welcome to episode number 314 of the Comic Watchers Show. He's Chad, I'm Matt, and this is our show where we talk about comics with really swell professional creators, like our guest tonight, Charles Ardai, who is here to talk to us about Gun Honey and Heatseeker, and things Pulp Fiction and crime noir. So,
Pulp Fiction,
Charles,
crime noir. And anything you guys want to talk about, I'm game to talk about it. But thank you. I'm delighted to be on here. Cool. I can't believe 314 episodes. So how many per week how many years to get to 314?
7?
Wow.
Ish.
Sometimes this is our second show of the week. So sometimes, but usually it's once a week.
Okay. That's impressive. You guys have been keeping this up for a long time, so I'm very flattered to be part of it.
Well, thank you. We appreciate hearing that.
Yeah, you guys keep it alive. We were just talking before we went on live streaming about all the sites that cover comic fandom, and most of them are labors of love. Hard Case Crime, which is the line that publishes Gun Honey and Heatseeker. We collaborate with Titan Comics, which does all sorts of high-profile titles like Blade Runner and Doctor Who and so on. But we have this little imprint inside Titan called Hard Case Crime. And Hard Case Crime was just a labor of love of mine. My friend Max and I decided we want to revive old-style crime fiction. And we just cast around trying to find somebody to help us do it. And, I think fan enterprise is the best stuff. It's when somebody really loves something and goes out and says, I'm not going to make much money doing this. Maybe I won't make any money. Maybe I'll lose money doing this. But you know what? I love it. And you get some of the best stories that way. That's my opinion.
Well, I have to agree with that.
So I know, Charles, you kind of came into comics and writing kind of tangentially through, after another, career. Tell us a little bit about.
It's kind of this weird zigzag for me. So when I was a kid, I was reading comics. That's every kid does, or most kids do. Flash was my character. You can see him over there, Barry Allen. And I loved comics. I never seriously thought I would write comics because, it's like imagining you'll make movies. It's a dream, but you don't really think you'll do it. And then I started writing for magazines. I was a video game reviewer when I was a teenager because no other magazine would publish a teenager, just video game magazines. And then I started writing short stories. And I thought I was just going to be a writer. Then what you're referring to is that I ended up starting an internet company called Juno, which was one of the early ISPs. We would give away just enough internet access that you could use email, but it was free. That was the idea behind Juno. And I did that for a bunch of years, and then I ended up doing other businessy things, but that's never really where my heart was. I did it, and it was a great experience. I'm glad I did it, but I was always a writer, a reader first, and a comic book fan even before, reading real books. And I'm glad I got back to it. When Juno ended up merging with a competitor called Net Zero, a California-based company that did basically the same stuff, I left. And I ended up just sitting drinking with the guy who designed the interface for Juno, who was this great graphic designer named Max Phillips. And we said, what do we want to do next? We did Juno for 7 years. We're kind of exhausted, kind of burned out. What would we like to do next? And he and I both were in love with these old crime novels, which were a certain type of thing, around World War II, 1945, 1953. Around that time, there were these really sort of skinny but beautiful paperback crime novels, usually with painted covers with beautiful women and tough guys with fedoras and guns. And the stories were really high velocity. These were like 100-page books, 150-page books, not 800-page doorstops. And they were fun. They were great. They were sexy. They were fun. And we said, why does nobody do those books anymore? They were fun. And then after 2 or 3 more drinks, we said, why don't we do books like that? Why don't we just start a line of books? And that's where Hard Case Crime came from. And so we got back to our roots. We started doing Pulp Fiction, and we didn't think it would last. This was like 20 years ago. We thought it was going to die. We thought 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And what happened was that Stephen King discovered what we were doing, and he really liked it. And he said, I want to help you guys out. And he wrote a book for us. And that put us on the bestseller list. And that's why Hard Case Crime is still around, because Stephen King just is an incredibly nice, generous guy. And he said, I'm going to write a book for you and keep you guys.
I suspect big things from him.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's gonna hit it big. Mark my words. And there have been other writers who have done us kind favors as well. Michael Crichton, while he was alive, let us reprint some books he wrote when he was a med student, in med school, and he had never let anyone reprint them, and he let us do that, which was really nice. And the reason he gave, when I talked to him about it, first he said Stephen King told me that I should talk to you, which was really nice. But the second thing he said was, I love your covers. And the third thing he said was, you can't tell anybody it's me. You've got to publish them under my fake name, the same fake name I used when I was a medical student. And we did. We didn't tell anyone it was him until 5 years after he died. His widow said, you know what, let's give him credit. Let's tell the world these were his books. So we finally did. But while he was alive, he said, I love your covers. I want to be incognito. I want to, go out in disguise and see how these books do without the Michael Crichton name attached to them. And that was cool. I was happy to do it. I told him, we'll sell 100 times more if you put your real name on it, but so what, let's just have some fun. So it's been writers like that having fun, and new writers too. And then that was all traditional novels where there was one painting on the cover, but everything else was just text. And then we hooked up with Titan to print and distribute our books, and they had Titan Comics. And Nick Landau and Vivian Chung, who run that company, it's a family-owned company, they said, why don't we try hard case crime in comics? Crime comics have not always been the most successful genre. It's not superheroes, it's not zombies, but let's give it a try. And we tried half a dozen different books. We did books with Walter Hill, who is the film director, and we did an adaptation of Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Those were sort of higher profile, and then we tried some other things, and some worked and some didn't work. So we kind of dabbled in it, and then but I promised them I would write one at one point. It wasn't so much a promise, maybe it was more of a threat. I'm going to write one myself, and but they were fine with that. They said, okay, give it a shot. And I sat down and wrote this thing called Gun Honey, and I honestly thought I was having a blast with it, but I didn't think anybody else particularly would. I didn't think it would be a big success. And then the first issue we put out, which I give a lot of the credit to Adam Hughes, the great cover artist, not just covers, but famous for his covers. He did a cover A for us for the first issue, and it ended up being the top-selling indie comic of the year, the whole year. And that's, indie comic, not Spider-Man, not Batman, not X-Men, but okay. But, and that was just such a launching platform. And every time I think, well, okay, people like the first series, but I'm sure they're tired of it by now. They keep doing well in stores. So as long as fans keep enjoying it, I love writing it. I could write 100 of these things. They're great.
So why don't you kind of I know because it started off with Gun Honey, and then you now have Gun Honey Heatseeker. Why don't you tell us about Gun Honey and how it kind of evolved into Heatseeker? Because I know we talked about it at New York Comic-Con this past year.
Yeah, sure. So Gun Honey, the premise was there's this woman who's this best in the world at what she does, weapons expert, but she doesn't use the weapons. I just thought that was kind of overdone, like the assassin character. I love assassins, but we've seen a lot of assassins. Mm-hmm. So I thought, what else can you do with weapons? And I thought, what if this woman, she doesn't pull the trigger, but she supplies the trigger. So whatever problem you've got, if you need a weapon, she'll get you the weapon you need, where you need it, when you need it, no matter how impossible it might be, no questions asked, for a fee. So that's her criminal specialty. And her name is Joanna Tan. She's a refugee from Singapore. She grew up in Singapore. Her family was is like a crime family, and they all got murdered except her. She escaped to the United States and reinvented herself as this weapons expert. And the first Gun Honey tells a story that's a very personal story where she rediscovers some secrets about her family and what really happened to them and takes revenge. And it's a good story, but it's self-contained. It could have stopped there. And then the stories have continued, each getting a little bit more elaborate, bigger. You start with this kind of small personal crime story, and by the time you get to the new series, which starts in June, with a kind of prequel coming for Free Comic Book Day in 3 days, that one is about how the U.S. government enlists Joanna sort of reluctantly to plant a gun in the Kremlin where they know the dictator of Russia is going to be interrogating a subordinate who is not very fond of him anymore. And they say, I would give $10 million for there to be a gun hidden under the table in the Kremlin when this guy's being interrogated. And Joanna says okay, and she agrees to do it. And of course, everything goes wrong. So we've gone from this little small crime story to a world-spanning story where whatever the outcome, whether this assassination plot works or doesn't work, the world is going to change one way or the other. Big things are going to happen. And so Joanna's story has ended up being this sort of James Bond scale, Mission Impossible scale, global story. And it's a lot of fun. So what ended up happening, it's drawn by an artist in Malaysia named Angkor Keng, who is terrific. He really works, he works traditionally. It's all pen and ink. Every time he sends me a photo of a page in progress, I can see the drafting table and the T-square and the pens. So I know this is not being done in a computer. Never mind AI, that's a whole other world. This is done the old-fashioned way, and his style is meticulous. It's a lot like sort of a young Frank Frazetta with a lot of cross-hatching, very detailed backgrounds and so on, and which is gorgeous. The cost of that is that it takes him about 18 months to draw a 4-issue series. So when we had put out our second series, Gun Honey Blood for Blood, we wanted to do a third, and I had scripts for it called Gun Honey Collision Course, but I knew it would take 18 months to get it out. And I don't want to rush him. I want the art to be gorgeous. So I said, what if we do a spin-off series and work with a second artist for the spin-off series? And we created this series called Gun Honey. It's called Heatseeker, in quotes, a Gun Honey series. It's set in the same universe. The main character of Heatseeker is a woman named Dahlia Racers, who is Joanna Tan's ex-girlfriend. And she has a different criminal specialty. If you've been marked for death, she will help you disappear. She will take the heat onto herself instead of you. She'll fake your death for you. She'll take your place. She'll disguise herself as you. And she will use various techniques of deception and disguise and misdirection and so on, sort of an illusion set of skills, not supernatural, just, like magic of the David Copperfield variety, or the Pen and Sword variety, or the David Blaine variety. Take your pick. In fact, her day job is inventing illusions for those guys. And she will get you out of hot water, even if it means putting herself into hot water. And so Dahlia had a series called Heatseeker, in which the person she was supposed to get out of hot water was Joanna. So at the end of the second series of Gun Honey, Joanna was on the run from government agents who wanted to kill her and her male counterpart who she teamed up with. And she went to her ex-girlfriend Dahlia and said, I need to disappear. And so the first Heatseeker story was Dahlia helping Joanna disappear. And then the second Heatseeker story, she was helping somebody else disappear. It was the teenage daughter of a scientist who had invented a biological weapon. And the daughter was being, we thought, pursued by his enemies to try to use her as leverage against him so that they could get this weapon. It turned out that the truth was something far worse than that. But anyway, that's Heatseeker Combustion, the second. And the third one, which is just coming out in graphic novel edition. Every time we do a 4-issue series, we then put it out as a graphic novel a few months later, is Heatseeker Exposed. This is an Art Germ cover. Art Germ is just fantastic. I'm so lucky to get to work with these guys. And there's also a Lucio Perillo cover and a Derek Chu cover. And Heatseeker Exposed, in that one, this investigative reporter, an online reporter who's out for clicks, discovers what Dahlia does and decides she's going to expose Dahlia's secrets and the secrets of her clients who are supposed to be dead but actually aren't dead. And Dahlia is the one, now this woman whose talent is making people disappear, the person she has to help disappear is herself. And so that's the third Heatseeker. So there have been, so far, 3 Heatseekers, 3 Gun Honeys, and the 4th Gun Honey is coming out. Free Comic Book Day has the prequel, and then Gun Honey Doubles Down is starting a 4-issue run in June. It's called Doubles Down, not only because the government's, when the first assassination attempt fails, the government says we'll give you a second $10 million to get it right, but because the reason the attempt fails is that the dictator uses a double, a look-alike, to interrogate the subordinate. So someone does get shot, but it's a double. And then the U.S. intelligence agency gets intelligence reports from 3 parts of Russia. 3 identical looking men have been seen in 3 parts of Russia, and they don't know which one's the real one. And so Joanna's job now is to find all three men, figure out which one is the real one, and make sure that the right target gets killed instead of the wrong one. That's the story of the new series.
I mean, you have the two series. Are you still able to kind of keep things organized? Yeah.
If I write them sequentially, I definitely can. If I'm writing two series at once and I'm going back and forth, issue 1 of Gun Honey followed by issue 1 of Heatseeker, then issue 2, it's certainly, I have to reread the issue to make sure I don't put a character from the wrong series into the wrong book. But it's not bad because they are an interconnected universe. I mean, the tone is the same, the flavor is the same. So it's not like I'm switching from doing, Animaniacs to doing Marvel Zombies. It's not that different. The spirit of the thing is the same, and in fact, the characters kind of cameo in each other's books sometimes. So it's not that, but going back and forth from one storyline to the other, I do occasionally feel like I'm a bit of a juggler, but that's okay. I think right now I think this is not a secret. I don't think this is a new piece of information no one's ever heard. We're launching a third series, which hasn't been named yet. The official name hasn't been announced. It has a working title, which I'll spare you because we'll come up with something better. And in Heatseeker Combustion and Heatseeker Exposed, Dahlia has acquired a girlfriend. I'm avoiding spoilers, but there's an antagonist in one of these series who changes sides and becomes not just an ally, but eventually Dahlia's new girlfriend. And this character has become something of a fan favorite. She's a professional mercenary, a trained killer. She's been genetically altered so that she can't feel pain. She also can't feel heat, cold, hunger, fatigue. She's like this killing machine, but she's also a geek. She's also a nerd. And so she communicates in Star Trek, Monty Python, Princess Bride quotes, and it's great fun to write her, and fans seem to like to read her. And so we're doing a series that's going to be starring her. Her name is Evie. And it opens, and this is something that I don't think I've told anybody. The first issue of that new series, which will come out toward the end of this year, opens at New York Comic Con, where an episode of violence emerges. But
oh no!
Yeah, but not in real Comic Con. Everyone's good. Everyone's peace tied. Everything's got fine. But here, there's kind of an interesting episode that reveals Evie's great talents.
It starts with a mild-manner comic book writer being accosted by a
with glasses,
a wannabe comic book journalist.
That's it, exactly, with a beard. There you go.
Yeah.
I think people will like. I hope. The only thing that annoys me is that it took me long enough to come up with the story that I don't think it'll be ready by October. I think it'll probably come out in December. And of course, if you have a book that starts at New York Comic Con, you want to debut it at New York Comic Con. But I think I missed the. I was just too slow. But that's okay.
You can have an ash can.
Yeah, I might do that. Right, just like an 8-page black and white thing. That'd be fun. Last time we were at New York, we had not one of our cover models, but a cosplay model dressed as Joanna handing out flyers. And if we had an ash can, she could be handing out those ash cans.
Yeah, she sat in on our interview.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. Yeah, she was great. Yeah. It's fun to meet the cosplayers who fall in love with kind of odd peripheral characters, because I totally expect to see people dressed as Wonder Woman or Elektra, but I don't expect too many people to know what Dahlia Racers of Heatseeker looks like. But it's cool. It's cool when somebody does.
Occasionally, you see a Deadpool, or
you see a Deadpool
every once in a while.
Once in a while, you see scores of various descriptions. And so one of the things I said to Ace Continuato, who's the artist that does Heatseeker and is going to be doing this new spinoff as well, I wanted to have in the background of the New York Comic Con scenes, I wanted to have lots of cosplayers, and I wanted them all to look like wrong for the part. It's like Spider-Man should be a different shape and size, and Wonder Woman should be a different race, and just it's like let's show what fans are really like. Let's show all the different data from Star Trek doesn't have to be pale, and anyway, we're having fun.
Is there a booze infested scene on a boat afterwards?
Wouldn't that be great? You're referring perhaps to the party that my colleague Cynthia von Mueller threw for the publication of Minky Woodcock, The Girl Called
Yeah.
Cthulhu. And Cynthia is an incredibly talented artist and writer and playwright and activist, and she does many things. She paints her own covers. She does all the interiors herself, writes these books herself, and there have been 3 of these Minky Woodcock historical detective novels. And the art style is very much a kind of throwback 1930s style of art, deliberately, using like aged page styles to make it look like old crinkly paper and so on. And they're great fun. There's a detective named Minky Woodcock, and she crosses paths with interesting historical figures. In the first book, she solves a case involving Harry Houdini. In the second, it's Nikola Tesla. In the third, it's H.P. Lovecraft and Ian Fleming. For good measure, Ian Fleming's in there too. And those are fun.
Matt, this is the same party that Lewis Southard and I were talking about.
Yeah, I kind of.
It's a thing of legend now, I guess.
It was, but yeah.
Yeah, Cynthia was on the prow of the boat, if I remember which end the prow is. She was at the prow of the boat reading people's tarot cards. She had a deck of tarot cards and was reading people's
And we got the capes to wear, and
that's right. She had velvet-lined capes, and I forget what else we had. I think there was a little tentacled octopus monster that you could take pictures with. And, yeah, Cynthia does the most extraordinary things. She does live shows based on her books sometimes. When we did the first Minky Woodcock book, which was Minky Woodcock, The Girl Who Handcuffed Houdini, she cast and directed and wrote a live and immersive theater show where she took over a building in the Lower East Side in Manhattan, and she had the show running in like 3 separate floors, many different rooms, and the audience would follow the actors from room to room. And there was Houdini, and there were, the various spiritualists who Houdini was trying to debunk, but they hated Houdini and wanted to kill him. And this was all going on all around you, and you could wander through the whole thing and see everything happening. It was great.
That's awesome.
It's really awesome. So that's
getting. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Getting back to kind of gun hunting. How do you kind of take the the tropes you expect to find in books like that and kind of give it a twist to something that's unique?
Yeah, it's a good question, because you've seen even twists. You've seen the same twists over and over again, right? So how do you tell a fresh story? And that goes for any genre. It's not just crime fiction. It's science fiction. It's horror. How do you do something new after several thousand years? When Homer came up with the Iliad, everything was new. Horse, soldiers inside it, that's fantastic. No one would see that coming. But, if I do a horse with people inside it, that's at best an illusion. That's an Easter egg, but it's not a surprise. So you try to surprise people. So I obviously, if I now list a couple of surprises, it's going to ruin the fun for people who read the books. But as an example, in the first Heatseeker book, I established this sociopathic killer, a woman named Sarah Claride, who is hired to get rid of problematic people by the government. And we understand that she's been hired to kill Joanna Tan. This is why Joanna needs to disappear. And so Dahlia is now disguised as actually, in an interesting twist, since she's 6 feet tall and her male buddy is about 5 feet tall, which is Joanna's height. She disguises herself as the male half of the duo, and the male buddy disguises himself as Joanna. So there's a little twist. But what we find out after 3 issues of this sociopathic killer pursuing Dahlia is that all along, this killer and Dahlia have known each other. In fact, they were lovers in college. And so we think that the killer is the great threat in the book, when in fact she's an ally all along. That is I think, except that I just ruined it, that is a surprise to basically everyone who reads the book. The trick is coming up with something that is really unexpected. And the best way to do that is for it to be unexpected for you too. That is, for the writer. And so I come up with the premise for issue 1, and I've got a general idea what the story outline is going to be. But what I try to do is, when I get to issue 3, change it, so that whatever I thought was going to happen, it's unlikely that that's the best I can come up with. And so I think, what would really surprise me if I turned this page and saw that? it would make me flip back 10 pages and say, wait a second, where did that come from? How can that be true? And so I try to come up with something that I hadn't thought of. And if I hadn't thought of it, maybe other people also hadn't thought of it. There's one like that, which I won't give away, in the new series, in Gun Honey Doubles Down. I was having lunch with Lawrence Block, who is this phenomenal mystery novelist. He's not as famous as John Grisham or Dan Brown, but he's been writing since the 60s. He's written 100 novels. They're really, really brilliantly plotted. And I was having lunch with him. I described the plot of this Russia story, and he said, well, you know what the problem is? If there are 3 people who look alike, and she has to track down all 3 people, everyone's going to know that the real one's the last one. Because if she tracks down the real one in issue 2, the story's over, right? So how are you going to deal with that? Of course, he's been doing this for 60 years, so he's a real veteran plotter. And I said, well, I have an idea, and I told him what the idea was, and his face lit up. And I knew if I could surprise him, then I've got something. So it's not, in fact, the case that the last of the 3 is the right one. Nor is it necessarily the case that the first or second is the right one. There are a whole bunch of ways you can turn a story on its head, and that's a fun thing to do. And also, the other thing is you don't do what in TV is called a bottle show. A bottle show is one where you end the episode where you started it, so that the episodes can all be watched out of sequence. You never change anything. Right. So the character can't change significantly. You can't do X-Files where Scully and Mulder quit and go to live in Belize at the end of an episode, because then for the rest of the season or the rest of the whole show, you're going to have to deal with them being, on the run in Belize. So they have to basically end each episode where they started, so that the next episode can start in the same place. But with comic books, you have a lot of freedom, and nobody's telling you what to do or what not to do. And so go ahead, change your characters' lives. And so at the end of the second storyline, this government agent that Joanna was working with for the last 2 series just throws his whole career away, in this incendiary fashion, and goes on the run with her. I don't think people expected that. You don't expect some character who's you don't expect Alfred and Batman to suddenly take up a new career as a figure skater, but why not, right? I mean, there may be good reasons not to do that particular story. That might not be the
bad ankles.
Yeah, bad ankles. That's why I'm not a figure skater.
I'm going to pitch it.
Coordination.
I say we pitch that to Scott Snyder, because he can make it work.
I think he could. Jim Lee drawing Alfred on skates. There's a winning combination.
Yes.
Now, what happened? So I haven't been following. Well, we don't have to get into Batman, but at some point, did Alfred die? Did I miss something?
Yeah, Tom King killed him.
I hate that.
Yeah, he'll be back eventually.
He'll be back eventually. But I mean, that goes right in the face of what I was just saying. Of course, kill Alfred if that's the thing to do. But don't do it in a cheap way. I mean, do it in a way that feels rewarding in the story and really means something, and where the reader, has some impact. Don't just do it to have something you can stick on the cover and sell more issues with. I don't like doing that so much. Like when Barry Allen died in Crisis, that really meant something. That felt important. A lot of deaths, they just, it's just bait. And so I try not to do baity things. I try to come up with storylines where the big surprise at the end is earned, and it has some weight to it. Doesn't mean I always succeed, but that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, at least you're trying. I mean,
at least I'm trying. But I will say, I use some of the cliches too. I do try. Like, you remember this old Mission Impossible? Everyone remembers the old Mission Impossible mask. You pull it off, and it's a different face underneath. But while you're wearing the mask, you look exactly like the person you're portraying. And by the way, your voice is the same too, right? That's ridiculous. That's a cliche, but I do that all the time because it's just too much fun. I have these disguises where the person being disguised looks exactly like whoever they're supposed to be, which that could not possibly happen, right? That doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't be the right height exactly. It just couldn't work. But it's just so much fun to do those masks that I do that.
So what's your least favorite cliche that you've had to use?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Least favorite cliche that I've had to use. It's probably the government agent who turns out to be a bad guy, because that's a little obvious. I mean, these days, what would you expect other than a government agent who turns out to be a bad guy? Come on. So that's probably a little obvious and a little on the nose. but on the other hand, it's also true to life, and certainly if you have people whose day-to-day trade is killing people, they're not likely to be the best human beings on the planet. And so I think there's a place for that in the story, and that's not the center of any of my stories, but there are these sort of government agents who are sinister thugs, and I'm moving away from that because it's just, I think, less interesting. That's this character everyone's seen already. It's not that interesting. It feels a little bit of a cliche. And so I want to do something that's more fun. The Russia story, Russia is itself kind of a cliche. Like you go back to the 1980s, it's like, Rocky fought the Russian fighter and Rambo went up against Russians, and Russia was the villain of choice for about 2 decades. And then it kind of fell out of fashion. So going back to Russia is a little nostalgic for me because I grew up with those old movies. Is there a way to make it fresh? Well, you don't see so many hammers and sickles on the flags anymore. They're, if anything, more capitalistic than we are these days. But although it's a close call, but I think a Putin-like dictator is different from a Stalin-like dictator, but it's still Russia. So is that a cliche? Maybe a little bit of one, but at least it's not the stock, thuggish government agent in the gray suit and so on.
Here's a character you can write: the government agent who is always on the up and up and always tells the truth no matter what.
That's not a bad idea. The Boy Scout, right? So the male character that Joanna teams with is a little bit of a Boy Scout in that way, and she kind of seduces him to the dark side because she's a criminal, and he is upstanding, upright, trying to do the right thing. Not quite Steve Rogers, but he's on the side of light, and she kind of drags him off, and by the time she's done with him, he doesn't have a job, he doesn't have a career. We eventually get him back a little bit in the good graces of the government after killing half the government, but the good guy government agent actually is kind of an interesting character. Whether I'll do any more of those, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out, so Ong is almost done inking. He's not done inking Gun Honey Doubles Down, even though we're about to publish the first issue. The last issue, he's still inking. And he started to ask me, what's the next one going to be? And because the time cycle to get the complete thing drawn and inked, penciled and inked, is so long, I want to make sure to get him in issue 1 to start working on as soon as possible. And so we're throwing around ideas like, what countries haven't we been to? What would you really like to draw that you haven't gotten to draw yet? Like pyramids. One thing he said he'd love to draw that he hasn't gotten to draw yet is a tank. So we've got to have a fight with a tank in it. What tank gonna be doing? I don't know yet, but tank. I promise you, the next series will have a tank. I'm thinking of Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade, where he has that great tank battle. But you can't rip off Steven Spielberg, or at least not. But there's got to be some. Maybe I can put a shark on the tank.
Okay.
I can rip off Steven Spielberg twice. I'm curious to see what he does in his new movie. Maybe I'll rip that off.
Yeah, maybe he's ripping himself off at this point. You never know.
It's entirely possible. It's Close Encounters meets Poltergeist. That's the way the trailer read to me. But
for Disclosure Day.
Yeah.
That's kind of the vibe I got too. So
I'm excited about it. I mean, I'll watch anything he does. It's like, how many more movies does he have in him? I don't know, but it's probably not 20. And so, each Spielberg movie, that's something special. Like each Tarantino movie, he promised the next one's the last. I don't know if that's true or not, but a Tarantino movie, that's a special excuse to go to the theater. Absolutely. And a Spielberg. So look, I would like, in a perfect world, I'd like people to feel that way about Gun Honey or these books, because we can't do a monthly book. The artists we're working with and my own pace writing the scripts, I don't know that I could turn out 12 issues a year. But what we end up with then is these little series. Like each story is 4 issues long, and it's kind of a special event. It'll come once a year, or if we're really lucky, we'll manage one at the beginning of a year and one starting at the end of the year. And so you get to see these characters irregularly. Once a year, you get to have an adventure with them. And that makes it feel more to me like, the next James Bond movie. It's like every summer there's a James Bond movie, or every 2 summers. Granted, the last time it's been 3 years. But the idea that it's something you can look forward to, a new Batman movie, a new James Bond movie. It's not like every week on TV there's more James Bond. And I'd like people to feel that way about Heatseeker and Gun Honey. It's like, oh, good, it's back. I'll read that.
Now you've written prose books too, am I correct?
That's true. I have written novels.
Okay. So, what have you learned from writing prose novels that you've applied to comics? And is there anything from your comic writing that you've applied to the prose side?
Well, certainly, the next time I write a novel, I'm going to have fewer scenes where people just talk to each other. And it's always tempting because you can write fun dialogue, funny dialogue. It can be snappy. It can be Joss Whedon, Aaron Sorkin dialogue. It can be great fun. But if you have two people talking to each other in a comic book for 5 pages, nobody wants to read that comic book. Something has to be happening on the page. There has to be something visually interesting. And I think there's no reason that you can't port that over into novels. There are novels that have a lot of action, but a lot of novels have quite a lot of talking. And so leavening the talking with things that are visually interesting, even if the actual visuals on the page are just words, that's something that I plan to bring into comics. From comics into prose novels. From prose novels into comics, I think the main thing is, and this is not, God knows, not my invention, but it's something that really started in the last 30 years. It was not there in comics originally, at least that I remember, is the internal narration. So I remember, like, Barry Allen would have an omniscient narrator with those Carmen Infantino hands pointing at things, the Scarlet Heatseeker can run at the pace of but you didn't get inside the head. Later with Wally West, it was, I'm Wally West, the fastest man alive, and I'm having a really bad day. And this idea that you can put the interior monologue of the character on the page and that readers will tolerate that or even enjoy that is something that you saw a lot of in prose novels and you didn't see in comic books, at least when I was a kid. And now it's common. It's not something that I'm saying I'm doing more than other people, but I find that gives more emotional oomph to a book. If you just see what they're doing, they're running, they're jumping, they're fighting, they're killing, whatever it is, if you don't know what it means to them, it has a little less impact, a little less emotion to it. So I like being able to give a little bit of extra sense of how the character feels. Well, you can do that in other ways. You can do it visually and so on. But that internal monologue, I don't want to overdo it. It's like voiceover in a film. You don't want too much of that. But a little touch of that, I think, it's like a little touch of salt on a chocolate chip cookie. It just makes it perfect.
Well, and I mean, historically speaking, voiceover and crime noir go hand in hand.
That's true. So if you go to the old film noirs, these black and white pictures, you've got this to the point of parody, right? So that eventually you get the Naked Gun movies where you've got Leslie Nielsen in his deadpan voice saying, "It was 8:15 and I was on my way to police squad." So it can be done as a joke, but it's true. You've got these downtrodden, bad luck, sad sack heroes in the trench coat and the fedora, and they're saying, "She walked into my office with a mile of legs and not an ounce of truth in what she was saying." That kind of thing. And that can be
it was a dark and stormy night.
It was a dark and stormy night, right? I mean, look, Blade Runner had a version with voiceover and a version without voiceover, and you can take your pick. But I do enjoy some amount of that interior monologue. There are some other things that I think are sort of prose novelly in Gun Honey, and unfortunately, you can end up with too much of that. It can be like too exposition-y. There can be more plot than you really need. I think most comic book readers don't want all that much backstory and plot. You don't have to go into the details of why a biological weapon, how it functions, what is it doing to the proteins in your body? Whereas a Michael Crichton novel, like you're reading Jurassic Park, you kind of want half a chapter on getting the mosquito out of the amber and how you get the DNA and how you sequence it and all that stuff. And it's a 400-page book. So 10 pages about that, that's fine. That's cool. In a comic book, you can't do that, but you try to import just a little. You have the picture of the mosquito, and then you have, a computer screen that's got a readout on it. And you kind of hope you get just enough in there.
Well, that's what kind of lost me when I was trying to read Hunt for Red October by Tom Clancy. It's like
Clancy was very detailed.
We're on page 10 of describing something.
Right, the submarine, the exact details of the HVAC in the submarine. It's like, okay, I get it. It's cool in the submarine. I have a little bit of that with Andy Weir. I was reading Project Hail Mary, which I enjoyed a lot. I haven't seen the movie yet. I've heard it's great. I'll probably go see it. But I read the book and enjoyed it. But it was like, in the course of the book, there were probably 30 episodes of something bad happens in the spaceship, and he figures out a sciencey way to solve it. and they were good. They were fun. But by the 15th of them, I just skipped ahead a few pages. It's like I knew he solved it, right? He solved it in some interesting way. I'm not an engineer myself. It's a 400-page book. I can skip ahead a few pages. So I don't want to do that in the comics. I don't want to make people like tired. There was a crime writer named Elmore Leonard, gone a bunch of years now, really good writer. And one of his maxims was, I leave out the parts people skip. I think that's really good advice. It's like, as you're writing a story, get to the part where you say, well, I'm not interested in writing this. I don't think the reader's interested in reading this. I feel obliged to put it in because the plot doesn't make sense without it. But, I wish I could skip it. You know what? Skip it. They don't care. Just get on with the work. And I think that's true. It's like, how does the Matrix work? We don't really know how the Matrix works. We had one shot of the squid animals with the humans as batteries. That's it. We don't need to know exactly how it works. That's enough. Get back to Keanu Reeves beating people up.
Oh, that's economy of storytelling, right?
That's it.
You don't bore people with the details, like you said. You give them the action beats, and Keanu Reeves beating people up or shooting people up.
Hugo Weaving, 18 Hugo Weavings, 1 Keanu Reeves. That's a scene. That's good. It's like, how does Hugo Weaving duplicate himself 18 times? I don't know. Who cares? Who cares? I'm sure there are examples where that's not true. Like, you read a book like Robinson Crusoe. Now, granted, that's an ancient book, but you read a book like that, and one of the things you really want is like meticulous day by day. On day 3, he built a hut, and on day 4, he put the corn plants up so that they would get the sun. And like a book like that can really be fun because of all that meticulous detail. So there are examples, but I doubt that would work too well in a comic. Can you think of an example where it's like minutely detailed? I remember one issue of Flash, I forget which incarnation, where I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it opens with Flash falling out of an airplane. And the entire issue is him falling out of the airplane. And there were some flashbacks and things, but it was minutely, page by page. He was going to crash when he got to the bottom. Of course, I can't remember why he couldn't just use his tornado speed or whatever it is to get out of that. But
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, another good example of that, there's an issue when Christopher Priest was writing Justice League 7-8 years ago, and the JLA satellite's falling, and the Flash is the only one there, and the entire issue is this overtly scientific explanation as to the physics of how the Flash does what he does, the science behind it.
That's cool,
And it's cool, but it's also kind of a chore to read.
Well, I could see that, right?
Yeah.
As a change of pace. Like if out of 5 years they do that one time, okay.
It's not like we're doing this every issue and explaining why Superman or how Superman flies.
Exactly. That would just be annoying. But yeah, I could see doing that once in a while. Like I could imagine a Gun Honey issue. Not that I'm going to do this, but I could imagine a Gun Honey issue that opens with her pulling the trigger of a gun, and the entire rest of the story is the bullets coming out of the gun. We don't even know who it's aimed at. And I could imagine that being an interesting setup, and then you divide that, like the whole issue takes place over the course of a second. That would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
I don't know what the story would be. Actually, now that I'm thinking of it, maybe.
Oh, see?
Maybe there's an idea there. And a journalist. But I think there is a way to do detail, but you only have 22 pages, and each page only has, 5-6 panels on it, maybe 7. And each panel only has room for so many words. You have to use economy because you don't have that much space. I mean, if you're Alan Moore, maybe you can, have an infinitely long graphic novel and it doesn't have to fit into floppy issues. But I think your typical monthly comic, you've only got so much space. It's like a TV show where you've got 27 minutes and you have to fit your story into the 27 minutes. It's not like you can ask for a 28. With streaming, of course, you can. You can have an episode that's 19 minutes and you've got another one that's 100 minutes. But in old TV, you had this many minutes, and when the minutes were up, your show was off the air. So
not only that, but you had to write for you had to write your beats in such a way that it had
for the commercials.
Had a commercial break in.
Well, you do that with comics too, right? Each issue has to have a good cliffhanger, because if you don't have a good cliffhanger, why would people come back? They want to know what happens next, right? Especially given that you have to wait a month, right? How do you hold people's interest for a whole month? You've got to have something interesting at the end of each issue. So you have that beat. And then within each issue, I find, and this is so obvious, but until I started writing comics, I never thought about it. It's like, if you want a surprise, and I've told people this before, if you want a surprise in a comic book, it's got to be on a left-hand page. Because if you turn a right-hand page and the surprise is on the right-hand page, it's spoiled, right? So you want, if something big and surprising is about to happen, you want it to be the first thing you see when you turn the page. And so I'm always trying to think, how can I land my surprises on left-hand pages?
Now, have you ever found yourself, writing an issue and kind of needing to get to that cliffhanger point, but kind of having to, I guess, economize or scrunch the story down?
Either direction, right? Either you have to shrink the story or you have to pad the story. You never want to pad, right? But you can always come up with some new thing that could happen. Yeah, there are definitely places where, like, there's one beat in the story about Evie, the mercenary who's also a geek girl. There's a very big thing that I want to have happen to her, which I'm honestly not even sure people will like tolerate because it's so outrageous. But I want to do it. And I think it's something I've never seen in comics before, and it's exciting. And so I want to do it, but I don't want to spring it early. It's like, if you're going to do something that big, you can't do that at the end of issue 1. That can't be the issue 1 cliffhanger. It's just too soon. You want it to be, you don't want to do it at the end of issue 4 because the whole thing's over. You want to get some payoff afterwards. So it feels like an end of issue 3 cliffhanger. Like this big thing is about to happen, and you get a whole issue afterwards to see the ramifications and the consequences. But how do I pace things so that that event happens at the end of issue 3? So you put things on index cards and you move them around and you try to figure out, how do I make the story work so that that thing, that sort of horrifying but ultimately empowering thing is going to happen at the end of issue 3. We'll see. And I might end up not doing it. Well, I might come up with something I like better. But right now I'm working towards an issue 3 cliffhanger.
How do you use pacing in that way to build a mood?
It's a good question. The mood of the story can come either from pacing or just from dialogue or the situation you put people in. It comes from a lot of things, but one of the aspects of mood is, does the story feel languorous? Does the story feel high velocity? Does the story feel adrenaline soaked? And pacing has a lot to do with that. Mm-hmm. So if you have people lounging in lounge chairs sipping margaritas, it's going to have one mood. It might be, relaxed. It might be ecstatic. These might be people on vacation soaking up the sun in the Caribbean and loving it. It's not necessarily that they're bored or suffused with ennui, but it definitely doesn't have a feeling of action. It definitely doesn't have a feeling of that sort of aggressive, forward-moving momentum. And so pace has an impact on mood and tone. For the next Gun Honey after this one, I was thinking, do I start with her leaping off a bridge in Hungary onto the deck of a boat passing underneath on the Danube? That's an exciting way to start a series. Or do I start with her lying on a lounge chair on a beach in retirement? She's just cashed the check for her, $20 million payday. She doesn't have to work anymore. And a call comes from the government, and the government official says, "We really need your help." And she says, "I don't care."
One last job.
One last job. But she doesn't want to leave her island. She's happy. And so those are two very different paces. And I think two very different moods. And I haven't decided between them yet. Do you open with her in a bikini, or maybe not even in a bikini, on a beach? Or do you open with her in the middle of action with bullets flying all around her? And both can be fun.
Sure.
So it's just, what do you feel? And also, what did you do last? Like, if the last time it opened with bullets, then maybe this time the beach. Just so you change it up, give people variety.
So who would you say your top 5 spies are that, in any, medium?
Any medium. Well, Bond is, at the top of the list for everyone because he's the king of name recognition, right? And he's sexy, suave, debonair, ruthless, depending on which incarnation you're talking about. Like Daniel Craig is more, and Sean Connery is more ruthless, and Roger Moore is more debonair and suave, but and Pierce Brosnan, I suppose, but they all have this mix of great traits that are just irresistible. and great gadgets and so on. So Bond is at the top. Modesty Blaise is high on the list, even though she's not precisely a spy, but she's some kind of criminal agent, and she is clearly a direct inspiration for Joanna Tan in Gun Honey. Modesty Blaise also was a refugee. Modesty Blaise is also a weapons, highly weapons proficient. She has a male sidekick. And so I think Modesty Blaise was a big part of where that came from. And Modesty Blaise, if I'm remembering correctly, began as a comic strip. Peter O'Donnell, who wrote it, wrote a series of novels, and there was also one or two, there were at least one and maybe two films, but I believe it began its existence as a comic strip. So that's a big part of the DNA as well. Best crime novel, best spy novel ever written, in my opinion, is The Spy Who Came In From the Cold by John le Carré. I am not a huge fan of le Carré because I find a lot of his details kind of boring, if I'm honest. But The Spy Who Came In From the Cold completely blew me away. It blew me away with surprises and twists that I didn't see coming, and also mood and tone. It is so bleak, so noirish that I think if you want like spycraft done the way it's done in the real world, and with those stakes and also that moral darkness to it, terrific. So that's three. It'll surprise you probably to hear that I'm not the biggest fan of spy stories. I do like them, but they're not my chosen genre. I read more detective stories and heist stories, and crook stories than spy stories. But there are still movies in the category like, Mission Impossible. Who says no to a good stunt-filled Mission Impossible movie? Or for that matter, the old Mission Impossible TV series.
Yeah.
And then, if you go back far enough, not that anyone's watching Bill Cosby these days, but I Spy, or Man from U.N.C.L.E., those were great fun too. And they had a little bit more in common with, the old 60s Batman TV series. There was a little bit of a spoof element to Man from U.N.C.L.E., but they were great fun. And of course, who's going to turn down a fourth Austin Powers movie if they ever get around to it? I'd totally see it. I don't know how old Mike Myers is now, but with makeup, he could probably still he could pull it off. If Sean Connery can come back for Never Say Never Again, he probably should do if he does it, he should probably do a title based on Never Say Never Again.
I would definitely be down with that.
I would totally do that. Although I saw something where he was saying that if he does make another movie, he wants it to be a horror movie because he's never made a horror movie. And he said something like, given that I'm named Michael Myers, it's a little weird that I've never made a horror movie. And I have to, that's a good point.
Fair.
Yeah.
I guess it was.
So those are the surprises that come to mind.
Okay.
I guess I kind of think that So I Married an Axe Murderer, even though it's a romantic comedy, it's kind of a. So.
Yeah. No, I was just telling somebody, I was at lunch with somebody just 2 days ago, and that movie came up. I don't even remember why. I hadn't thought about that movie in years and years, but I liked it. I don't even remember the plot particularly, although it's probably summarized in the title pretty well.
He was dating this girl who he thought was a murderer or something like it. It's been a while.
Yeah, I forgot the details, but I remember he gets brought back to meet her parents. I forget the details, but I remember laughing. What more do you want from a movie? You don't necessarily have to remember the story, but you had a good time watching it.
How did it make you feel?
How did it make you feel? This is popcorn entertainment. You can certainly name movies where every detail of the plot is seared in your brain, whether that's The Godfather, or for some people it's Casablanca, or whatever it is. And there you can quote line after line, and you really know it beat by beat. But there are other movies that just were great fun. And some are both. Like for me, Raiders of the Lost Ark is the perfect movie where you can quote every line and you remember every scene, but it's also just pure fun. Die Hard is another one like that. Terminator 2. My ambition, whether it's making, writing novels or comics, or if I ever am lucky enough to make a movie or something like that, it's just, I want people to come out of that experience feeling they got their money's worth and they were entertained. And, that's hard to come by these days, but
how would you kind of leading off that, how would you feel about a live action Gun Honey type
I'd love it. I think it would be great. I did work on a TV show called Haven, which ran on Sci-Fi for 6 years. It was based on one of the books we published by Stephen King called The Colorado Kid. And when the first Gun Honey series came out, I sent a copy to one of the producers I worked with to create Haven. And he liked it. And he said, why don't we turn this into a TV series? He had a partnership. He still has a partnership with a production company in Malaysia, which happens to be where the art is drawn, and it also happens to be where the character's from. And so we hooked up with this other production company in Malaysia, and we talked about the idea of actually filming it in Asia with an Asian cast, and seeing if you could turn the story, which could be set more or less anywhere, could you do an authentically Asian version of Gun Honey, where she doesn't leave Asia as a refugee and come to the United States and reinvent herself here. She continues to ply her trade there. I like the idea. It's an interesting idea. And we started working on it, and they convened a writer's room, and there's a pilot script written, and the first season of, I think, 8 episodes has been broken, so we know the beats of the episodes, and it's terrific. And it goes far past where the first series, Gun Honey in comics, stopped, and it introduces new characters and all sorts of interesting things. They did a really nice job. The one thing that's missing is the funding. Now, filming there would be somewhat less expensive than filming here, but it's still, you need funding to film a TV show or streaming series. Yep, that's it. And so they've been pitching it and trying to raise the money. And every few months I talk to them and I hear how the discussions are going. And because these are film people, I was going to say Hollywood people, they're not Hollywood technically, some are Hollywood, some aren't. Film people are optimists, because I think if you're not an optimist in Hollywood, you can't make it. You have to face relentlessly insurmountable odds and nevertheless feel that you're going to make it somehow. And so every time I talk to them, it's on the verge of happening. It is absolutely going to happen. It's on the verge of happening. And then it's 5 years later and it hasn't happened yet. But I kind of believe it's close. Of course, I believed it's close for 5 years, but I kind of feel so it could be that this time next year there's a kind of fun, scrappy, grindhousey version of Gun Honey that's done as a live action series, shot either mostly or entirely in Asia, and that would be fun. On the other hand, there's part of me that wants to take something like Heatseeker, which is very big budget, which has big stunts. Gun Honey also has stunts, but Heatseeker is, I've sometimes described it as Gun Honey feels darker, moodier, a little bit more like Christian Bale, and Heatseeker feels sort of brighter colored and reckless and wild, a little bit more Tom Cruise. And so I think Heatseeker, I'd like just put it in the hands of Christopher McQuarrie or somebody like that, send it to Sydney Sweeney to play the lead. And I mean, you've seen our covers, and do it as a big budget action spectacle. And that would be fun too, So the smaller grindhouse, low budget version would be cool. And the big budget spectacle would be thrilling. I'd love it. Obviously, who wouldn't love that, right? But will it ever happen? Who knows? I've learned over the years much more gets talked about in Hollywood than ever gets made. It's a miracle anything gets made. And of course, now studios are combining and shrinking, and everyone's terrified of AI and with reason. And
remaking stuff that's already been made.
and then making things and shelving those things and not letting anyone see them. That's another wonderful thing that studios do these days. Although I saw the trailer for Coyote v. Acme and it looks pretty darn good. So that one it finally is coming out, but I don't know if we'll ever get to see Batgirl.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, it'd be fun. It may be a bad movie. Who knows? It could easily be a lousy movie, but I'd still enjoy seeing it.
Sure. Why not?
Absolutely, especially if they use the Yvonne Craig batsuit from the old '66 TV show. I'm sure they didn't, but that would certainly bring back fond memories for me. Granted, reruns. I'm not that old, but it was. I do remember. I remember being particularly happy when I saw the opening credits of a Batman episode and I saw that Batgirl was in it. I thought that makes it a better episode. Cesar Romero was great. Yvonne Craig.
So, well, Charles, thank you so much for hanging out.
I thank you for letting me come on and pontificate and talk about all this stuff. I really appreciate your guys' support. You've been part of the family of fans out there that have been reading and covering this, and it really means a lot. So I hope people pick up Heatseeker Exposed in graphic novel form. I hope they pick up Gun Honey Doubles Down in floppy issue form. And if this Saturday, if anyone's watching live and you go to Free Comic Book Day and supplies have lasted, as they say, while supplies last, but there is issue 0, which begins the story of Gun Honey in Russia. And I hope you pick it up. Hope you enjoy it. Hope if you do or don't, if you love it or hate it, post something online. I love reading what fans say, even when it's negative, and thankfully it's mostly been positive. But I will take anything as long as people are reading my stories and responding to them. That's great.
That's the dream, brother.
That's the dream.
All right.
Will I hopefully see you in New York this year?
Absolutely. I live in New York, so it would be very strange for me not to get to the Javits Center if it's just, a subway right away. But I probably won't be in San Diego this year. I just don't think the timing works out. I love San Diego too. I'd like to go. So if I don't go this year, I'll probably be in San Diego next year. But I'm always online. People find me on Twitter. I still can't call it X. I don't have it in.
Nobody calls it X.
Nobody calls it. I think one person calls it X. That's about it. But it's not hard to find me. So if anyone has questions or comments, I am an inveterate online lurker. So you'll find me on there somewhere.
Well, why don't you give one last pitch for the book?
Sure. Well, Gun Honey Doubles Down is the highest stakes adventure that Joanna has ever gone on. And whatever happens, good or bad, is going to change the world. It will literally not be the same world at the end of this story as it was at the beginning. And if you've never read Gun Honey before, this is the perfect place to start.
Awesome.
Plus, a great Adam Hughes cover. He's done one for every series. I hope he gets better soon. He's fighting some health stuff now, but he came through with a cover before that hit him, and it's beautiful. And if you apart from enjoying the good story, and I hope you do that too, support Adam. I think it would be great. Pick up his cover, although we have many wonderful covers, but I'm particularly happy that we have one from Adam. So yes, please come to your local comic book store and get Gun Honey and enjoy the ride.
And support your local comic store on Free Comic Book Day by buying something while you're in there. Don't just get the free stuff.
Absolutely. These comic book stores are paying for these free comics. They aren't paying very much, but they're paying for every copy, and they are bringing you in the door with that, but hoping that they'll sell something as well. So pick up something. I couldn't agree with it. Back issue.
I just can't walk in and grab any comic I want.
Yeah.
Right. It's not just Free Comic Book Day. It's Free Comic Book Store Day.
Told you last year.
Store. I hope nobody takes that seriously. Oh, I'd get in trouble. But no, I think if you can go in and just pick up one thing that isn't free, while you're there, no matter what it is, you're just going to make their day, and it's worth it. There's a comic book store on Nostrand Avenue in Brooklyn that I go to often, that now has opened a fresh squeezed juice counter. And
nice.
and it's like you do anything, whatever the fans want, and they make. So if you're on Nostrand Avenue in Brooklyn and you don't feel like buying a comic book, at least buy some juice.
Well, one of the comic stores I go to when I'm visiting family down in West Virginia, they have a bar. They sell beer.
Really? Like alcohol?
Yeah.
I can only imagine the fights people can get into after reading comics and drinking. That's perfect. I think it's great that comic stores are. I think it's great they're selling trading cards. I think it's great they're selling figurines. By the way, it would be fun to do Gun Honey figurines. I don't know who does those things. I should look into that.
You should look into that.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Life size. Now that's a whole other.
Well,
maybe not. That's a different line of business. But I think there are many ways that comic book stores have managed to sort of eke out extra bits of income, and I think it's very healthy for them. But I have read, I think maybe it was on Sketched, somebody did an essay about comic book stores maybe having a bit of a resurgence. Business is not so bad. Everyone, of course, was shaken by the Diamond bankruptcy, but I think sales may in fact be doing okay. So I'm crossing my fingers. I want this business to survive and succeed. I did when I was a kid, I would buy comics on spinner racks in drugstores, but comic book stores have always been somewhere very special. There have been a bunch in New York City. Of course, you always could find some comic book stores here, and going in, it felt like a wonderland. It's like going into a magic store and seeing all the magic tricks on the shelves, seeing comic books. They're all just delicious. Even if the characters are ones you don't love already, it's just seeing those colorful covers. I love comic book stores, and yeah, you can order things on Amazon, but it's not the same.
No,
I remember my first time walking into Midtown Comics.
Midtown Comics is great, and I've done signings there. They're really supportive. They're great. Yeah, Midtown is terrific. There used to be, I don't know if Jim Hanley's Universe is still around in New York. I should check. They were around for years. And now you see these manga specialty stores popping up. Those are interesting too. I'm not knowledgeable about manga, but it's very popular. So I'm glad that these stores are, as far as I can tell, doing okay. I always wonder if there's a juice bar opening, is that a sign that maybe the comics need some help? But I don't know that that's true. I think it may just be once you've got a congregation of fans in one place, let's see what all the things are that we can give them. There's a place on the Upper West Side in Manhattan called Heatseeker, which is basically like a D&D gaming cafe. You go in and they've got a bunch of games. You don't have to buy them. You can buy games, but you don't have to buy the games. They're just sitting there. You can sit there and play games. And what they sell is time playing the games, but they sell food. And, you're getting tater tots and all sorts of delicious things, and they let you play the games. So, I could imagine a comic book cafe where you get to sit and read comics, and although you'd get your fingerprints all over them. So maybe
you gotta be careful.
I'm not sure how this would work, really. I think actually I heard that in Japan there might be some comic book cafes where you can just sit and read while ordering drinks and so on. I may be wrong about that. Maybe I just made that up, but I seem to remember that. So yes, patronize your local comic book store. They need it. They deserve it.
We implore folks every week at the end of every episode, support your local comic book store, support local music, support local art, especially if it's illegal art that's been spray painted on the side of a train or something. Like, we love this.
I'm a fan of street art. I've always been a fan. I granted, if it's my wall and somebody sprays graffiti on it and it's not a pretty one, I suppose maybe that's annoying, but I am a believer in outsider art. I think it's great. And don't spray on people's poodles or something, but the wall, it's a wall, it's a mural. We've had covers painted by a woman named Claudia Caranfa, who's done both comic book covers, quite a few, and covers for our novels as well. And the last time I reached out to her, she lives in Italy. And when I reached out to her, she said what she's been doing lately isn't covers so much as murals. And she showed me some pictures of these huge murals on the sides of buildings I assume in Italy, somewhere in Europe. And they're gorgeous. And I love the idea that somebody who works small in comic book covers also works huge. Can you imagine if Art Germ did a mural somewhere that would be so amazing. Or Alex Ross. Imagine if there was the side of a building painted by Alex Ross. That would be worth it. That would be worth it. Exactly. So I love seeing all sorts of art, whether it's, legal is probably a little better, but.
All right. Well, we got to go ahead and wrap it up.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful for all the time you gave. Yeah. I hope people weren't bored. And please give Gun Honey a try, especially if you're a superhero person and you've never read crime comics and doesn't sound that interesting. Just leaf through it in the store. I think you might see something that catches your fancy.
Absolutely. Well, Charles Ardai, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Chad, who do we have next episode?
And I can't remember the name, but it's the person who is the writer who is writing the new Clayface miniseries. Will be joining us.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, until next time, get out there and do some good in the world. And thank you for supporting us. You can catch us at comic-watch.com every day.